And I feel like that's still a great partnership to have, because throughout the state of Texas, it it is a model that they follow, that PTA does kind of take interest in SHAC, and there are places where they have worked together. So I just wanted to let you all know the reason why I hesitated in speaking in the capacity of council president is because I was appointed in an individual capacity. And if you wanted to make a council president serving on the SHAC board, that kind of recommendation, it would be important for me as council president to discuss that with the council PTA executive board first, to kind of make that partnership set in stone. So I feel like it just needs to be discussed further. I still wanted to say that it's a great partnership because finally we are serving the same community, and it's it's like council PTA president kind of works with 53 PTAs, right? So when we talk about the numbers of the members, we on an average we have like 20,000 members every year. So it's kind of having one parent's viewpoint versus having those many viewpoints. That's all I wanted to add.
Yeah, and I would say, I think that is a sentiment that a lot of us have as far as partnership and collaboration with not only the PTAs, but also some of the other boards and committees that we have. I know that before we talked a lot about the equity committee and the work that they do, and really wanting to make sure that we should really look at how we can partner with some of the other work that's going on in Round Rock ISD. And I would love to really pick that up and seeing a more formal way that we can assure we partner and know about what's going on. So anybody else have anything they'd like to discuss?
I have something to add to that. I have a baby also that's crying, so I'm going to do the best I can, but I'm sorry, you guys. I think CPAC has a similar interest in partnering with SHAC, the student, Special Education Parent Advisory Council. And I think that it'd be good to explore having someone, like some of those partnerships happen without the people that are serving in that capacity having a voting interest on the SHAC. And I know that there would need to be further discussion on that. That way it's not taking away one of the trustees' membership appointments to the SHAC, but at the same time we'd still have those partnerships, and they would still be able to inform some of the decisions that get made by SHAC. And that's not something necessarily that we need to explore tonight, but I think that it would be good to explore that further for sure.
Thank you. All right. Any other discussion before we move into now our committee recommendations? And I know I have some unstable internet, so I might turn my video off, especially during presentations by our different committees. But why don't we go ahead and get started? The Human Development and Sexuality Committee, would you like to present your recommendations? Do we have someone from that committee that was going to do it?
Yes, I know.
We're all here. We can do it.
Okay.
Yeah. Who's first?
Sorry, I totally closed my window right when you said that. We have 4 recommendations to make, and let me get to the first one. The first one is Hillary.
Okay. And I just wanted to ask, because there's a lot written here, so am I supposed to read the whole thing or give a summary? I know you all got this ahead of time.
Yeah, if you can just start with the first recommendation and give us a summary. I think we can look at the language and then we might want to go into the language, but if you can give us a summary first, that'd be great.
Okay, thanks. That's what I thought. I just want to make sure. So the first recommendation for the Human Development and Sexuality Subcommittee is mandatory training for school and district staff in supporting LGBTQIA students, families, and staff. you can go through it. I mean, basically the school health issue is that there, are high suicide rates for LGBTQIA people in general. And so there's stats there. And there's research about how having a firmly family and friends has helped suicide rates. There's even a little bit about efforts that like Round Rock ISD has had some one-off efforts, but nothing necessarily systematic. So I went through that part quickly, but it's there. So we recommend a one-time mandatory training be provided to all Round Rock ISD teachers and staff, either in person or online. This one-time training will be provided to all staff and new staff as they enter the school district. So our recommendation is like a one-time training. We also recommend that optional trainings and workshops be provided as part of ongoing staff professional development. Attached, please find a list of potential resources for both in-person and online professional development in supporting LGBTQIA students. And so we have some resources, we didn't say what resources would have to be used, but we're just trying to add a list of folks both within the district and outside the district that be called on to provide training.
All right, and so it sounds like that's the full scope of the first recommendation. And again, reminder, this is what we recommend to the board as far as what we think would be helpful in our district. So any thoughts, discussion, questions for the committee?
I have a couple questions. I guess I'd like to understand the one-off situation, what you learned about that, and then how having this mandatory training fixes that, or were you concerned that there's just a lack of knowledge of resources within the district? Because I think we ran into some similar things in the mental health subcommittee, but can you just talk a little more about that?
Sure, I can. We did. So this recommendation came out of 2 years of this committee. So some of this is going back. Pre-pandemic, we talked to a few. We reached out to I'm forgetting the term, when a staff member at a school is the sponsor of like a student club for supporting gay and lesbian students. And so some of the staff members we reached out to said there's a lot of gay, lesbian, and transgender. There's a lot of just bullying going on in schools, a lot of staff misunderstandings going on. I talked to also I'm a mental health therapist myself. I talked to a colleague in the community who has a private practice that specifically focuses on transgender youth, and his office is in Round Rock ISD. I mean, he doesn't have kids, but he sees a lot of mostly Round Rock ISD kids. And he said there's a lot of ongoing issues. The one-off was kind of, we were trying to research what had been done in the past. We found a news article, Round Rock ISD transgender students accommodated case by case. It was in the Austin American Statesman in 2016. So there's been work being done, just not necessarily systematic. It's sort of been all over the place. And so from interviewing some of the staff in schools and through interviewing therapists and this therapist who's in the district, it just seemed like there needs to be something more systematic. And I know, like, I can only speak for myself, like coming from healthcare, we have systematic, I mean, is it perfect? No, but they do have systematic mandatory training, and say like all the local hospitals and major hospital systems have similar training. And that's why we said one time. We know there's a lot of demands on people's time. So for now, we're saying one time, but I know in healthcare, there's usually mandatory training, both when I worked in a hospital system and now that I work for an insurance company. So it seemed to make sense to bring that over to the school district as well.
And just a quick follow-up, what is the school district's, I guess, policy procedure on what becomes mandatory training versus optional training? I mean, would this be something that qualifies as an option for mandatory training from the school district perspective?
Yeah, I can speak to that. The mandatory trainings that we have in place right now are the ones that are required by policy. And so those would have been trainings that are put in place by the Texas legislative session passing policy or law that requires teachers to participate in that. The only other one that I know of, and it's related, the most recent example would be House Bill 3 required reading academy training for all educators at the elementary level and principals as well, and gave a 3-year period for that. So we do have suicide prevention training, we have bullying training, there's several. And what we do with those is we house them in an online platform called Rise, and that makes the training accessible to staff members. It also is our way of validating that each staff member has participated in it. It gives us the opportunity to nudge those who need a nudge if they haven't finished the required training by a certain timeline. So to answer your question, the only other ones are required by statute at this time.
Let me make sure I understand, because I don't know if I'm clear. Is it the Round Rock ISD's required trainings are all statutorily required?
The compliance trainings are, yes.
Okay, they're only statutory ones.
Yes. So other professional development is going to vary by campus need and or by teacher need. But we typically only do those district-wide blanket trainings for what's required. We've had maybe a few other instances in the past where perhaps there was a new textbook adoption that all elementary teachers, were getting, that we might do a brief training on that. But other than those, there's not a district-wide blanket training required for all. And LaShonda and Amy, anybody else that knows of something I am not thinking about, please chime in and tell me if I'm missing anything.
All right. Any other thoughts or discussion?
Yeah, I have a thought.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I always wait for the chair to call on me in these virtual meetings because it can be hard otherwise. So I find this recommendation interesting, but I'm mostly thinking about what a challenging year our teachers, our students, and our staff already have had this year, and what a challenging year next year is going to be, especially when I think about new teachers coming online. They're going to be facing how to cope with missed learning from this year, for revisions to curriculum, to those reading academies, like Ms. Estes just mentioned, the coming surge of student mental health problems that a lot of us are anticipating, maybe even unrecognized abuse. I mean, there's so much stuff that our teachers may have to face next year, and our students too. So our staff's time seems really, really precious, especially this summer. And to ask them to add on a mandatory training this summer seems a little bit more than maybe we should be asking of our staff who are already pretty stressed out. And especially in light of those comments that the other trainings that are mandatory are pretty much dictated by the state, I would find it really difficult at this point to recommend this training in this particular year.
So Mandy, can I ask a question? What is it called when we have trainings that are available but not mandatory? How do they describe those?
Those are also often housed in that same platform, and they're just optional trainings for people to be able to access anytime, anywhere. And if I could add another point, I did not hear a delineation of an amount of time or specific content to be covered, and I think that's fine. We can work with some of the resources Hillary referenced to curate that training, but most of those compliance trainings are relatively short, about 45 minutes or so to work through the module. So what I was hearing in that conversation was a fairly brief training, and not like a day-long training. So if I'm misunderstanding that recommendation, we might want to add some language to clarify that.
We purposely left that open because, we don't know what the other what the other mandatory trainings are and what's going on. And that's why we just put a list of resources, because I know you can get those 45-minute online trainings. You can have a day-long training, so we purposely left that open.
I see Michael wants to say something. Go ahead, Michael.
Thank you. I totally understand the previous comment about the teacher stress. I know several people who are contemplating whether to stay in the field or not, and I totally get that. But as Mandy pointed out, as a recent former teacher, I know how important those trainings are just to even get a half-hour exposure. There is a lot of bullying going on, and it's subtle. It's really subtle. And so some good training on what to pick up on so that those kids are not continually harassed and victimized, I think outweighs the stress of the teachers, because I do think it'll just be minimal, and it can, and the great district team can make sure of that. But it's important that we we shed light on this for our faculty, because they aren't aware. They just aren't.
And do we know if on those optional trainings that are on that same platform, whether there is anything on this topic already?
I do not believe there is. Dr. Grosso, do you?
No,
recall
I know some
anything specific.
I know it is a topic a lot of campuses have started to think about and wanting to just even start doing some introductory things. So I think even if it is something district-wide, to put some resources like that, some training up there, so that we know, is it consistent? Best practices could be helpful to the campus.
So I have a thought on this recommendation, but let Sanahal go first. Go ahead.
I was just going to ask, like last time, one of the meetings we had discussed that we will have some immediate recommendations, like 1 year and then 3 years. So, and the other thing is like, I mean, as it was mentioned earlier in the comments, that next year is going to be difficult. Well, not difficult, but more stressful, right? With all the anticipated challenges and work to do. Is it possible to kind of give some, add to the recommendation, giving some flexibility at the campus level? I don't know what would be, because I feel like it will be different at every level, elementary, middle, and high. And also some campuses might have more urgent needs or more problems than some others. And is it possible to give, because the trainings has, even mental health and wellness, we have some recommendations on the trainings, and we kind of discuss a similar dilemma that next year is going to be difficult. At the same time, we want to make sure everybody has that help. So what is possible that, yes, these are the recommendations SHAC has come up with, but we want to make sure we give the flexibility to our district administration to make the call on what's best.
Yeah, they will. And if we want to adjust our recommendation to say that we make that we recommend the board make available optional trainings from this list of trainings that have been vetted by the SHAC committee, so that there can be access immediately. That might be an adjustment. I see Mr. Woolridge would like to say something. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I can completely understand the concern about teacher burnout. I mean, this has been a very difficult year for everybody at all levels, students, parents, teachers. And I really just want to just support what Michael was saying, as far as that support that's needed by those students who are being bullied is really important. And I feel like this kind of training is something that could help mitigate worse issues further down the line. And so for me, it's okay, we get to put in the time now, or we don't, and then it becomes a bigger situation or bigger situations during the school year that requires a lot more effort. And when it comes to me, I'm perfectly fine with allowing some kind of flexibility. I don't know if it needs to be campus by campus. I guess what I would say is, if a campus wants to try to say, hey, can we not do this? I feel like there needs to be a pretty significant justification. I don't think it needs to be that campuses can decide that they either will or won't do it. But if they say, hey, we think we're pretty good, they need to be able to provide some kind of justification, because I feel like the campuses that know they have an issue are going to want to do it. And the ones who don't know they have an issue likely don't know they have an issue. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It likely means that they just aren't aware of it, and they may need the training even more so than those who are aware of it. So that's what I wanted to offer.
Thank you. And we might also think about, if we want to tackle this one bite at a time, like, is the first step making the resources available as an option, and then we look at furthering it and having recommendations related to a plan to expand that training to assure everybody who are at different campuses are able to receive it. I think we can do things like that. So just any other thoughts or discussion about the recommendation as it is and any potential changes or adjustments y'all would like to see?
Just one comment, if you do something like that, knowing that there's probably a few campuses that would be willing to pilot it, and then we could get some good data of which trainings were effective for them and really were helpful to the staff and which ones were better than others. And so I think we definitely would have some campuses interested in that, and that could be pave the way for what could come later.
And Dr. Faulkner, you'd like to say something?
Yes, thanks. Before we vote and try to make it optional, I mean, I really don't want to make it optional. I want to keep it mandatory, only because I've personally seen incidents of teachers being the bully. And I think that, you know, one incidence of that is one too many. So I don't know if we want to maybe, if people want to make it optional, to propose an amendment and then we vote on that. And then we vote on the full resolution, Judge. I'm not sure. But I personally want like a vote on making it mandatory.
Okay. So then is there any more discussion just on understanding the recommendation and everything that surrounds and encompasses this recommendation? Okay.
Judge Jones, I'm sorry, I don't have a raise your hand feature in my.
Oh, no worries. I saw your hand. Go ahead.
Okay. Just as a follow-up to what Dr. Faulkner said, I feel like with us being an advisory committee to the trustees, that it's our duty to, you know, vet what's in line with, you know, typical protocol for the district and what isn't. And I feel like taking something forth as mandatory that isn't really in line of how the district, you know, puts forth mandatory training needs to either come with some explanation of that to the trustees, or we should really stay in line with, you know, how this type of training would typically fall within the district training as more optional training. So that's my only other comment.
Okay. So are there any motions?
Well, I would entertain a motion to make the training optional instead of mandatory.
So you move to
I'm-
amend it to make
Yes,
it
I
an
would move-
optional training?
A move to amend the motion to make it optional instead of mandatory.
Okay.
I'll second
And
that.
all right, so we've got a motion to amend the recommendation to be optional and then a second. All those in favor, can you either select the thumbs up icon on the reactions or just put your hand up? And this is an amendment to make it optional. I'm counting 1, 2, 3, 4. And those opposed to amending it to making it optional. All right, I have at least 8. So that motion does not pass.
I would like to make a motion to make it available instead of mandatory.
To make it available instead of mandatory?
Yeah.
Okay. And that's different from the optional?
I feel like available, optional and mandatory kind of puts a different viewpoint on it. Available is at least we have done that first step to make it available. And then like Dr. Grosso suggested, we can explore into the pilot programs. So we are not completely making it mandatory, making it difficult. And we're not completely saying that it's optional. So it's like, I feel like there is a difference between those two words, but it's, if nobody wants to second it.
I
Is there
have
a
I have a question because I feel like maybe I'm not understanding. We're talking these trainings that you're referencing are not very long, right?
We
Or
didn't
what
say
are-
specifically.
But some of the trainings that were listed on the document, I thought that I heard folks say that some of them are 30 to 45 minutes. Or is
I
that?
don't know about the one specific on the document. I think we were talking about other trainings that are usually mandatory are shorter trainings.
Okay.
Hillary?
So I just,
Oh, sorry.
not
Go
really.
ahead, Kelly.
No, it's okay. I just wanted to clarify because I understand that teachers' time is precious. But I feel like it would be different if we were talking about having them go through a, you know, 2 or 3 day training or, you know, hour long once a month or something. Like if we're talking little short webinars or what have you, like I'm not seeing the major problem for the value of what we're getting.
And I think we just weren't very specific. So it could be short, it could be long, the way we're recommending, the recommendation is proposed. Hillary, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I was going to say the resources listed are everything from a short 30-minute thing to an entire, like, you know, these are just a list of resources. We just wanted something and thought it would be up to the district. And then I want to ask Nihal about your amendment. Was it more like, are you amending it maybe to say, we are recommending the district pilot some trainings at a few schools? Like, would that be how might you rephrase it?
The reason why I suggested is if we don't do anything on this, then we are not doing anything, right? But if we make it mandatory, then we are going on the totally on the other side, that it's mandatory for everybody. But making it available is, you could qualify it saying that it will be piloted at, say, 5 campuses, and then based on the observations, you can kind of go plan further. But available to me is is the first step, that you're if you're going to make something available, you're going to look for what are the trainings that you are going to offer and where would you offer that, and kind of pilot it, right? That's what I meant to say.
All right, so is there a second for the motion to make the recommendation that we have the training available? All right, no second. So then do we have any motion for the recommendation as it is for it to be mandatory?
This is Michael. I have a motion to carry it as is.
Okay, do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Judge, I'm sorry, I didn't put my hand up, but can I make a suggestion?
Yes.
Can we do a record vote on these so that we're sure that everybody's recorded the right way?
Sure, and do we have somebody who's helping us record the notes? I don't know if we have somebody.
I'm taking notes.
Thank you. Have you been taking down specific names?
Not yet, but I will.
Okay.
Would it be easier if we typed our votes in the chat?
I can count in the chat, but Heather, is that helpful to you?
Yeah, especially if I can get a copy of the chat later.
Are we doing more discuss? So I have more, I guess, all staff. Does that include like teacher aides and bus drivers and all staff?
Yes.
Okay. And I'm wondering, I guess it's not really our problem, but I'm wondering where the funding for the time would come from. Like, it's hard to get. Mandy, can you kind of, that's where I'm spinning my wheels a little bit on this one. Can you kind of guide me? Because I'm not even sure what I want to ask, but.
Absolutely. I'll be happy to. So for our staff who are hourly employees, as some of the positions that were just referenced would be, that would mean that the district would need to pay them for however many hours they're engaging in that training. So We calculate the amount of the state required compliance trainings that occur annually in a number of minutes, and that amount of time is paid to the staff members that are hourly. I want to say it's something like 3.5 hours worth of state required training around in that area that staff participate in annually.
But aides and stuff like that, they're already tapped out by, like, there's a bunch that would be on the list that in terms of like, hey, this kid has a behavioral disorder that we need training for, but it's not in the budget already.
So I think I'm hoping I'm following you, Katie. So just jump in if I'm not hearing.
Right. No, it's okay. I'm sorry,
yes.
you guys. I'm sorry to be using y'all's time this way. I'm just
No, you're good.
I'm spinning my wheels on this one a little bit, and I'm trying to figure out why I am. But
yeah. So instructional assistants, aides would be hourly employees, and so typically they come back on contract, for example, a few days before the students arrive back on campus, and that gives them time to help prepare with their teachers and at the campus, as well as to get any of the compliance training knocked out. And I will add one thing, if I may, for just the committee's recommendation. Please don't read anything into this, because I'm not sure how relevant this is, but what I think our staff often find is compliance training is a box to check. And so when this conversation started going down the optional path, I thought, oh, that might make it a little bit more appealing to some of the staff, to be honest with you, rather than along with science lab safety rules that I have to go through, or any of the other compliance trainings on different topics. They're a bit of a box to check. I'll just put it that way. But that said, we can certainly add this in as another topic if the SHAC recommends it and if the board approves it. We have the platforms to do that, and it sounds like Hillary's team has put forth some resources to help us get that training developed and up and going.
So we have the motion and the second. Any more discussion? All right. And then go ahead. No.
Are we qualifying it from the time perspective? How long will be the trainings, or?
That's not how the recommendation is worded. So that would be up to the board.
Yeah, we left it open time-wise. Anything from a quick thing, if they want to send people to a week in Hawaii, whatever you want to do.
And I just want to I like that it is open, because I think there's only so much we as a committee should be doing. Like, we need to make recommendations, but as far as if there's any specifics that the board wants to actually look into, or maybe even bring back to us, like, hey, this is something we're not sure about, or can you all recommend this because we want to go in this direction, then I think we can do that. But I think as far as making kind of a general recommendation, I think this would be a fine way to go.
All right, any other discussion? Okay, so then all those in favor, please put in the chat you are in favor. If for some reason you have a problem, just speak up and let me know. Going to give a couple more seconds. All right. And now anyone opposed, please put opposed in the chat, or speak up if you are not able to do that. All right, has anybody not cast a vote? Any voting members not cast a vote? All right. I counted 11 in favor and 5 opposed. That means that the motion passes and the recommendation will move forward as a recommendation for mandatory training. All right. So then your next recommendation.
Our next recommendation is about a health class, and Monica Faulkner talked about that.
Sorry, I lost my screen too. So this recommendation was suggested to us actually by district staff as something to consider. And I remember there was a discussion, in the before times when we were meeting in person about potentially adding a health education course to the high school curriculum. And there were some great points raised about that. And so our recommendation is essentially to just explore, not mandate, but explore the option of having a health education class in middle school. And so just some of the background on this is that health education is not required in Texas. In Round Rock ISD, it is a half credit elective. And then the data that I've seen over the years, and the most recent I had was from 2018, is that only 25 students in high school took the health class. And the problem we run into every year as a SHAC is that we learn about new curricula and really innovative programs and where can we put this SEL content, et cetera. And we would have a natural home for that stuff if we had a health course. So we're not at all asking for anyone to explore that option in high school because there is just so much we squeeze into high school. But we wanted to recommend exploring the possibility of putting that course in middle school. And what we're asking in our recommendation is that there's a committee that's appointed that's co-chaired by health services and the athletics departments, that district staff, SHAC members, relevant professionals in community, students, I think are really important. Teachers and parents are on that committee, that they meet regularly, and they rely on district staff though to develop content and materials between meetings to move them along. And then we're also asking that that committee represent the diversity of the district students population and include student perspectives in a meaningful way. So essentially all we're asking is the board to appoint a committee that starts to work on this. And then that committee, if they feel like it's the right thing, would then bring it to the SHAC to recommend next year or the following year to the board. So that is that recommendation.
Thank you. And so this, any questions, discussions? Jennifer, go ahead.
So I want to say I really appreciate that you looked at this at the middle school level. I know it's vocal about how busy students are at the high school level. So I really do appreciate that being, considered a little bit further. Are you looking though to do this as a required course or an elective course? Or are you going to fully let the committee explore both of those options? And would you be looking at it as a full year credit? Because I believe right now it's a half elective credit. So can you comment on that a little further?
So the way it's written is explore the possibility of requiring, but I don't see that as the committee has to say, yes, we want to require it. And then we didn't specify, the amount of time. Because I think that's not our expertise. I think that's really the district folks' expertise of like how much content they would want. And that's why we went to this idea of a committee rather than us just saying what should happen. Because I do think it's going to take some thought, to put into it and really some more exploration. So I can't see a reason why the committee could not come back and say, no, we don't want to require it. We want it to be an elective, because it's just exploring the possibility. So.
Any other thoughts, questions, discussion? Okay, do I have any motions?
All motion to adopt the amendment.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
And then all those who are in favor to adopt the recommendation, if you can just drop in the chat that you're in favor. And then if anyone is opposed, go ahead and drop in the chat that you're opposed. I'll give just another second because I don't think there's anybody opposed. All right, everyone was in favor, so that recommendation will move forward. Your next recommendation?
The next one is Robin. It's urinal to toilet recommendations.
Okay, hey everybody. So where this comes from is there were some kids who were not behaving properly at the urinals in some of the Round Rock schools, not just elementary schools, but also older kids. And that violates the modesty and the privacy of the other kids, which can be traumatic, especially to abused children. That's why we proposed that in all new construction and all renovations, we replace urinals with toilets. We talked to some architects who are working on current renovations and current new campuses in Round Rock ISD. And they said that this is actually the direction that a lot of districts are moving in, not just Round Rock either, also Austin ISD is another example. And Spicewood Elementary, in fact, is going to be converting their urinals to toilets. It's kind of the way of the future, and they showed us how it would be done.
Any questions, thoughts, discussion?
Question.
Go ahead, Jennifer.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Then I'll get Kelly right after that.
Yeah, when you talked to the architect, did you get any type of cost?
We did not get any specific costs. Am I right, Jill? Yeah, we checked in with that. We didn't get them, but they seem to work in just fine with the budget for Spicewood Elementary and even for SHAC Elementary School in AISD, and they were able to make it work. They just have to figure out how to configure the electricity and the HVAC properly and the plumbing in order to make it work. But they basically said it's not hard.
All right, Kelly.
I just was clarifying that this is just for new stuff, and then I was going to ask a budget question as well. That if it's only for new stuff, is the cost approximately the same? It sounds like there might be some extra cost associated with plumbing.
So I can take this. From what I understand, new construction, the cost would be relatively the same because they would build it into the blueprints. Retrofitting does have some added costs in some instances. It depends on what year the school was built, you know, how they have to retrofit what's there to have it be a stall. There's some ADA requirements and stuff.
Okay.
So new school budget wise would be the same. Future or renovations of existing buildings would be a case by case basis.
And are there any sort of, like, I think I understand the pros of what y'all are trying to address with this. Are there any drawbacks that y'all found to having to go in the other way and having, I don't know, capacity, or I don't know what the drawbacks would be, but just curious if anything came up.
They built the restrooms to be the same size for both boys and girls, so capacity shouldn't be an issue.
Thank you.
No problem.
Any other questions or discussion?
I think Becky has her hand up.
Becky?
Yeah, I just have a question if there's any precedent from the past that I might not be aware of about the SHAC making a recommendation like this, because my initial thought is that this would fall in the realm of something like a citizens bond committee who is recommending changes for future construction projects?
I think this would apply to current bond projects, and this is just for the planners to figure out. This wouldn't be a special renovation. This is when the renovations happen, this change should be made.
Okay, and then related to that, I wonder how it fits in with the mission of us here on the SHAC having to deal with health curriculum, that this seems a little bit more like a construction project than something that we know much about.
The SHAC does a lot more than, go ahead. Okay, I'm gonna let whoever's talking talk.
Sorry, Robin, it's Hillary. Some of it came up discussing, I know my son was, I remember my son brought up to me, he was confused there were urinals because he had a training, they had like an anti-child abuse training at his school where they told the kids, you know, other people shouldn't be looking at your private parts. And he's like, but you can see them at the urinals. And so then they were all the boys were standing in line only for the stalls and not getting back to class. And there were also issues with boys holding it all day. So there were like health issues coming up, at least at the elementary school level, related to this with withholding and not using the bathroom and not getting to class on time. And then
so I don't know about withholding. I think every kid withholds at some point, but I think your point about the private parts relating to curriculum is something I can buy. I just wanted to see that we're not overstepping our bounds as the SHAC.
We do so much more than create a health curriculum though. I would say most years we're not recommending a health curriculum, and this is unusual. But the recommendations can be about a lot of things as long as they're promoting like the health and safety of students and staff.
Okay, it would be nice maybe in the future for that to reflect on the bylaws and the other documents that us new people read, just so we don't get confused in the future. Thanks.
Any other questions, discussion? All right, do I have any motion?
Motion to adopt.
Second it.
All right, any other discussion? All right, so then if you are in favor of the recommendation, please put in the chat that you are in favor. And thank you, Dr. Faulkner, for making the break. All right, and if you are opposed, please put in the chat that you're opposed. All right. Looks like we have a majority in favor, so that recommendation will move forward. And I believe y'all have one more recommendation.
Last one, we go back to Monica, right?
Yeah, I actually, and I haven't consulted with our committee, but I kind of want to pull this one down. And I'll tell you what it is, and then I'll tell you why. So currently in 6th, 7th, and 8th grades, we use the Living Well Aware curricula, which used to be called Worth the Wait. And parents have an option of opting their child out if they don't want them to participate. And then each middle school campus gets to decide how and when the curriculum is presented. There's always information meetings for parents to read the curricula. So the Living Well Aware curricula was developed by Dr. Sulak, who was at Baylor Scott and White, and she's now got her own, I don't know if it's for-profit or nonprofit, but she's got her own entity set up. And she's completely revised the Worth the Wait curricula and made it a little bit more expansive in terms of talking about like comprehensive health curriculum, not comprehensive sex ed, but like comprehensive in terms of talking about different aspects of physical health. And so we were thinking that we would recommend that the new edition be adopted. But based on what I'm hearing right now, I'm sorry, I'm blanking, but the people who adopt the textbooks, that council, Mandy, those
State
people.
Board of Education. State Board of Education.
Yes. Thank you for thinking for me. So they are looking at different sex ed curricula right now and vetting them and lining them up with the TEKS requirements. So my understanding is that is going to be available to us soon. And I think that probably the better recommendation is that the SHAC just kind of table this and look at that next year and really vet a curricula. That's my thought. But if somebody, I'm sorry to my committee, because I know we talk so much about this, I'm so sorry. But if you guys, want to vote on this, that's fine. But I think it deserves a lot of attention. And I think next fall, the SHAC would need to, whoever's interested in this topic would need to kind of just come out strong and start meeting right away, because it takes up so much time to look through these curricula. So happy to answer questions.
Questions, discussion? Jennifer.
Yeah, Monica, I'm glad you brought it up because I was going to ask a question about that. So as I've been trying to learn, I understand the legislature or the State Board of Education did vote back in the fall to change to an abstinence plus curriculum, which then in turn seems to take that next step, like you said, and the textbook companies, publishers can, I guess, offer textbooks. And I don't think I've ever gotten an answer to this. Mandy, I hope maybe you can, but I guess I wanted to understand the path for a school district once the Board of Education changes the curriculum. They're working on new textbooks. I think from what someone has shared with me, if the school district adopts something that is statewide approved, there's no cost to the district. But if we would look to develop curriculum outside of that, there would be cost to the district. Is that true, not true, or?
It's in the middle.
Okay, good enough.
We do have a technology and instructional materials allotment fund source that the state gives us for the purchase of instructional materials. And so materials come in on a 9 or 10 year cycle. The state board reviews, for example, elementary science materials, and then there are certain resources that are vetted, and we buy those new resources out of this allotment. It comes in every 2 years, and so it's a biannual allotment amount that we have. But yes, it could be purchased out of that fund source, to answer your question.
So Monica, do you think your committee then would go along in that direction, wanting to recommend from what the options are available to us, or are you still looking for the district to develop its own unique curriculum? Because I felt like that was the path your group was originally going down, but are you going in a new direction or no?
I don't think I ever felt like we wanted to develop our own curricula. I think it, because one, I think that's really hard. I wouldn't want to do that. But I think it's more of we just need like a committee to really vet things, whether it's what the school board recommend or the State Board of Education, or something else that people think is really important. I've read a lot of these curricula in professional capacity, so I'm pretty familiar with a lot of them, but I think there's so many voices in the district, and we would want to be really conscientious about including those different perspectives and voices is my thought.
And so I want to be mindful of the rest of the work we have. Dr. Faulkner's talking about wanting to pull this from being presented as a recommendation. Is anybody else on this committee opposed to that? I see head shaking no. So then we will leave this here. And Leslie, you had something?
Yeah, so we're just wanting to, like she said, table this or pull this for right now while we wait for what the TEKS are coming out with, or what the new like the new lessons that are coming out with, so we can get a better handle of what those are.
Right.
Is that what I'm understanding?
Yes, that's what it sounds like. And I've even taken a note to make sure that we don't forget about it over the summer.
Okay.
All right. So then it looks like we can table that one and we'll keep a note on it. So that takes care of the recommendations from this committee. I want to make sure, was there any recommendations from the wellness committee that we needed to address today?
No, ma'am. We were working on our strategy for school gardens, but we didn't have a clear recommendation yet.
Just wanted to make sure, because I do know that the Behavioral Health Committee has a bunch for us to talk about. So I wanted to make sure we didn't have to reserve some time for wellness.
No, not today. Not this
All right.
Thank
so
you.
Then, no problem. Mental and behavioral health. We want to start with the first recommendation.
Yes, we can start with the first recommendation. And I wanted to just take 1 second to kind of give a little premise. I know that there's a lot of them there.
Yes,
and
please
so
do, though. Yeah.
Thank you for your time. What ended up happening is that about midway through, or actually it was kind of around the time of Snowvid, we started talking about, we got some data back, I think is what happened. There was a survey that really sparked a lot of conversation among the committee members and sparked a lot of ideas. And so we ended up developing a lot of recommendations sort of based on the feedback and the survey that the district had provided to us. And thank the district. Thank y'all very much for making sure that we got that data. Just showing some concerning feedback that we were getting from students and kids. And we started talking and wanting to be sure that we were getting our recommendations down on paper for what we thought the district could do to prepare for, the next year and future years, and helping our kids kind of recover and move past this really traumatizing year. And so that's where all of this came from. We spent a couple of meetings really hashing out some email chains, hashing them out. Wanted to get some feedback and input from people within the district who would have more experience implementing some of these policies. So that would be Mandy, Estes, thank you so much, and Dr. Grosso. And we also reached out to Rochelle Fink. We also reached out to Dwayne Street for his opinion on diversity. I didn't get anything back from him, and I'm just not sure if I didn't have the right contact. But I wanted to set that as a premise. Now, we didn't get necessarily, I would say we got a blessing from the directors within the district on everything here, but where we didn't necessarily alter or remove anything that wasn't blessed. And that's because we wanted to keep it in, keep everything kind of in as a benchmark for future mental and behavioral health committees to continue considering. And if there was programs where the feedback that we received was that this is already in the works, like it's in development and we're working on getting this going, we probably kept that in too, because we want to make sure that the committee follows up, like that next year's committee or whatever can follow up and check in on how those programs are progressing. So that's just sort of our introduction to these recommendations. So I just need to pull up my document. So our first recommendation, I'm going to let the person who sort of authored the recommendation talk about them, but our first recommendation is that the district develop some effective empirical means of evaluating mental and behavioral health needs of students and staff, and that just kind of stems from the surveys and our reactions to the surveys being maybe not necessarily empirical, scientific, but perhaps indicative of some problems. But Snehal, do you mind? I know that recommendation was kind of contributed to by multiple members, but Snehal, do you want to talk about that one?
I think the first one was Judge Jones.
Oh,
Yeah.
Please go ahead.
Yeah,
sorry.
the first one was Judge Jones, who had put together based on all of our input. So
Oh, okay.
if
I'm
you wanted to
sorry.
go over it, you
Yeah,
can.
please, Judge.
All right, give me 1 second. Pulling up the document as well. So I think the language that I see, because it I think was tweaked a little bit since we did the kind of updates, that oh wait, hang on.
It has been tweaked a bit.
I just wanted to make sure that I was still on the same path. And basically the recommendation was just to make sure that our mental health centers are equipped and prepared for whatever may come once we are back to whatever the new normal looks like. We wanted to make sure that they were fully resourced and supported to have guided efforts to make sure that all the students and teachers were able to resume, when they're fully in person, and that we think about, equitable allocation of the alignment of our resources to make sure that all of the schools and the students and the teachers are getting what they need to be able to address the issues and the transitions and any difficulties that may occur in trying to transition back to that in person after so many kids were, either virtual or not used to having as many students who would be back in person as there would be. So it's kind of a full scope thought about making sure our mental health centers are best equipped and best prepared to support students and staff when we transition back to more normal like school setting. Any
Does
questions?
anybody have any questions?
Yeah. Any thoughts? Concerns? Okay. So
Do we need a motion?
Yeah.
I make a motion that we adopt recommendation 1.
Any second?
A second.
All right. And then if you're in favor of the recommendation to make sure mental health centers are resourced and equipped to handle the transition back, please put in the chat you're in favor. All right, if anybody is opposed, you can put in the chat opposed. All right, I'm not seeing any opposed, so it looks like we're all in favor to make sure those mental health centers are equipped and prepared. We'll move that recommendation forward.
Okay. So for recommendation 2, this is one that I have not talked to the committee about, but I was thinking that we might just remove this just strictly because of logistically, because of time. It was to advise or have the district plan a bunch of summer opportunities for kids who have been really disconnected and disengaged. So opportunities, I know that the district is planning on doing some things. This plan recommendation was ambitious, and it was mostly kept in there to send a message to the district, which we could still do, that that we want our kids to be engaged as much as possible this summer. But I'm also okay with taking it out just because it logistically, I don't think it's probably possible or feasible by the time
And
they
if
get this document.
Kelly, if you don't mind if I jump in just to let everyone know, Rochelle Fink and I are in the process right now to get postings up. We're going to be providing SEL camps throughout the summer for our 5th graders transitioning to 6th grade, since we know that's such a critical time. And so there'll be 2-day camps fully focused on just connection, coping skills. We'll also open that up most likely to 6th graders who have been virtual all year. And they might be then returning to a campus as a 7th grader, but it's the first time on their middle school campus. Rochelle Fink's also working with principals that are leading summer school so that SEL curriculum is incorporated into the lessons, so that I just wanted everybody to know that
there is
yes, there's a lot of work happening within this realm, and we're really excited about the SEL camp and then the other things.
Hey,
Thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, go ahead, Robin.
Thank you so much. Will there be any virtual options for connection over the summer? Not everybody's going to be going back in person until their children are vaccinated. And I don't want those kids to be left out, because kids can still get coronavirus and they can still spread it to each other and they can still have long-term effects from it. And I just want to make sure that all of the kids are being looked out for and not just the in-person kids.
And I should have mentioned that we are looking at some options for the SEL camp, but to provide some virtual experience alongside, that they would have their own track so that they can be receiving the same type of curriculum, but modified for virtual learners.
That's fantastic. Thank you.
So it sounds like Kelly wants to make sure we just not move this forward. It sounds like there's some things already happening. There's timing wise, we might not be able to really expect this to occur. Is anybody on the committee opposed to that? All right, not seeing anybody who is opposed. So then we'll move on to the next recommendation.
Okay, so this is the third one, and Dr. Jennifer Faulkner, I think this one was yours. I've lost I had prepared a document that had everybody's name outside of it, and I have no idea what happened to it. So I'm sorry if I'm getting this wrong, but Jennifer, I think this might have been yours.
It was, and I think it's pretty self-explanatory, but just asking the district in their public communication to have a more balanced message for families in consideration of choices that they are taking, both COVID as well as mental health considerations, and the impact both of those things can have. I think our messaging has been entirely focused on the physical side of COVID, but we've had a lot of negative mental health outcomes. So just looking for the district to rebalance that messaging.
Can I make a comment?
Yes, Robin, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm a little bit wondering about the ambiguity of the language there. It, to me, implies that virtual education is antithetical to mental health. Whereas I know that my virtual child would be anxious being indoors for the first time in over a year, having to keep her mask on, which doesn't usually go very well just because it doesn't fit properly. And I think that my child would be very anxious indoors. And if we're going to balance the communication, we should also talk about how being virtual could actually be better for your mental health, especially if you've been bullied, if you have neurodiversity issues. There are a lot of kids who flourish virtually. And I think sometimes those children are ignored, especially as a virtual parent. I feel like the school district is always telling us, like, go back in person, do this stuff in person, and we can't. So I would love if there would be some communication about, this is what you can expect when you return virtually, and this is what you can expect when you return in person, and perhaps the pros and cons of each, recognizing the reality of different kids' situations.
Hillary?
Maybe Jennifer, you can clarify. I thought regarding future school selection choices meant selecting a school in Round Rock ISD. Like, I want to go to Palm Springs versus Jollyville. So maybe I misunderstood it. So I thought it was about school selection choices in district. So I think did I misread it? I think Robin read something opposite of me.
Yeah, so go ahead, Jennifer, if you want to clarify.
Yeah, I'm not referencing school selection whatsoever. I'm simply referencing that as the district is communicating with parents and choices in the future for whatever school selection choices come our way in the fall, that the messaging from the district is not 100% COVID consideration, that the district is also balancing that out with mental health considerations as well. so that we are giving families equal opportunity to think about what their selection is doing and what impact it's having on both the physical side of the house as well as the mental health side of the house. Unfortunately, we had a suicide this year at Cedar Ridge. I don't know any of those details, but I think there has been a lot of concern for isolation, and it's something that we just have not had that balance in messaging, and I think that messaging is important going forward.
And so if I can make sure that I understand clearly and that we are thinking about it from the right perspective, is it that we want to say when messages go out about parents who need to make choices about whether or not their children go back to school in person or go virtual, that the message isn't solely on considerations about the physical catching of COVID and the concerns surrounding that, but also the mental health impacts that the choice may have? Is that what we're talking about, Jennifer?
Yep, that's well said. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions?
And Robin, when we were kind of formulating this, I also kind of considered it because some of my kids have been home longer than others for exactly the reason you described, anxiety related reasons. So I kind of viewed it as whether you're staying home for mental health reasons or going to school for mental health reasons.
I think that's reasonable. I think we should update the language to reflect that, because there are a lot of people on the board, for example, and in parts of the upper echelons of the district who appear to imply that virtual education is bad for your mental health. And I'm fine with balance if it's truly balanced.
I have a question. This might be a more administration question, but as we've had the flexibility to decide whether our children go to school virtually or in person, is it possible that the way that's considered in the future may change as far as the reasons why our children are not going to school in person and whether the virtual option will be even available?
Yes.
Mandy, is there an update about funding? Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
So as of today, there is no funding mechanism from TEA for a virtual option for next year. We have been watching as an administration team the House and Senate bills that are surfacing on that very topic. There is a House bill that was left pending on March 30th that seems like it's not gotten a lot of traction since then. There was a Senate bill that last week, we watched some debate testimony on that one that seemed to have some support in the Senate. It was to launch or to set up a virtual learning academy, being a separate school within the districts that chose to go that way. It would be more of a permanent, non-COVID type of approach. It would loosen up some of the barriers that are in place now for districts who want to set up something similar to an early college high school type of opportunity, but a virtual school. So as far as in response to COVID, no, there's not a funding mechanism that's been brought forward from TEA to extend what we're under now. However, there may be some path forward out of the legislative session to open a virtual academy.
So would it make sense if we wanted to look at this recommendation that we put the caveats in there, that if it is still an option and there is continued messaging related to the option of in-person and virtual schooling, that we make more of an effort to take into consideration all of the impacts when parents are making those choices, both physical and for mental health?
I think for me, that makes a lot of sense. And I think if we were to propose a virtual academy to our board and the board were to approve it, I would definitely think that we would want parents to think about, there's going to be many factors that they need to consider in enrolling their child.
Judge, I just took a stab at some revised language for this to incorporate this feedback. Is that appropriate? And if so, is it appropriate for me to put it in the chat for discussion right now?
I think if you can put it in the chat and then we can read it and see if there is any motion on any updates to the recommendation.
Okay, let me see. I just realized that it's still in track changes, but I don't know if that's going to translate. Let's see. I think this is right.
Mandy, are you guys still considering cameras in the classroom for next year since we have the technology to do that? I know it came up in one of our earlier meetings.
We do have cameras in the classrooms with the interactive flat panel. So I think we have those in most all of our classrooms at this point. I'm not sure where that deployment is, but I think it's pretty much out there. However, know that the virtual options that I'm seeing the legislators consider are not that blended model at all. It is a separate virtual school with virtual only students in it. That's what they're talking about right now.
That's really unfortunate, especially because it would benefit kids who are like sick with the flu also. Is there a way to, I don't know, is there a way to recommend that that be feasible in the future? Are our hands that tied?
We'll be bound by what is decided in Austin. So I don't know if that answers the question, but we will very much be bound by that. But I don't want to get us too much off track down that path, because we're all kind of in a wait and see place with that right now. But certainly I think the recommendation as it was being discussed would be appropriate should we have that virtual option going forward.
All right, and so we have in the chat an update. Thank you so much, Kelly. That if virtual schooling is still an option in the 2021-22 school year, that Round Rock ISD adopts balanced communication to parents and the community regarding the choices of families to attend either virtual or in-person school that mention the benefits of both mental health and physical health COVID considerations. So now we have some additional language. I'm open for any motions.
I motion. Sorry, I second it. No, I second it. I was gonna, but yeah, I'll second that motion.
And so Dr. Faulkner and Mr. Woolridge, is it the amended version in the chat?
Yeah,
Yes.
I was saying that to adopt the amended version as stated in the chat.
Yeah, and I'm seconding that motion.
All right, any more discussion? Okay, all those in favor, please put that in the chat. All right. Anybody opposed, you can put that in the chat. All right, it looks like everyone was in favor, so that recommendation will move forward.
Okay, number 4, and Dr. Faulkner, I believe this is yours as well.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we just wanted to make sure there's continuity across the district and we don't bring students back in larger numbers next year without full mental health resources. So if we do have gaps, identifying where those are and any vertical learning communities, and making sure we have those resources funded and ready to go for next year.
Any questions or discussion? Jill.
Do you have some examples of what this would be, referencing or helping? Like, where did this recommendation come from?
I think it began because we had some vertical learning communities with the counseling centers on the campuses. And I believe those were started in the Cedar Ridge and Stony Point learning, and McNeil, or I'm sorry, Cedar Ridge, McNeil. And Dr. Grosso, maybe you can chime in.
Yeah, I'd provided a long write-up about especially this one, and then 5 through 7 deal with a lot of the mental health centers, and I think there's a lot of misinformation. So the mental health centers, they were started not this year, the year before, under Dr. Lewis and Dr. Wiswell with counseling services. It started with Round Rock Learning Community in Cedar Ridge, but that was just where physical offices were. It's not like they didn't serve any student within the district. It then expanded as demand called for it. We expanded it then to a third and then to a fourth. We have not expanded past the fourth, but that doesn't mean that those counselors aren't going across the district. I provided updates to show that numbers that this was as of March 26th, Westwood Learning Community, 70 students had been referred. Then McNeil had 67, Stony Point had 45, Cedar Ridge had 43, and Round Rock Learning Community had 39. So I think there's some miscommunication and misunderstanding that just because a physical office wasn't planted at Westwood High School doesn't mean that Westwood Learning Community is not being served. They're actually had more referrals than any other learning community in the district. And so we currently have 3 therapists. The one left, they're currently trying to hire. If anybody is familiar with mental health right now, it is extremely hard to find any providers currently. And so they're actually pulling some other people to help cover those. We don't have more than a few weeks to a month waiting list, which Bluebonnet Trails in their practice, if we didn't have these, they're on an 8 to 10 month waiting list. So our students are being seen incredibly fast. The main delay that ever happens there is getting parents' signature on forms. Now that we have the social workers are partnering with the counselors so that they can actually, they go to the homes, they get the forms. So we're really partnering together to make sure that we have as short a gap as we can with those centers.
Yeah, thanks for the memory jog on the physical space. I think that's what we wanted to ensure, if there is importance of that physical space, that it gets rounded out in the remaining learning communities. I don't know if there are privacy or access issues there, but we just wanted to make sure it's equitable across.
Well, and there's spaces in each school. I mean, they've been virtual for the most part this year. Some are doing in person, but just because there was a physical space at Round Rock High School, they still had to have a space when they went to Bluebonnet Elementary. And our counselors work with the district staff so that there's always space available when a student has an appointment with their therapist. So that's not a concern at all. They do float around because once again, we have 4 therapists for the whole district. And I just want to point out to you, this is one aspect of a wide range of services our students have within mental health. We're up to about 315 referrals for the mental health centers. As of today, the social workers have had over 500 referrals. So there's many different ways our students are being served outside of the mental health centers too.
Any more discussion, questions, or concerns?
I do.
Go ahead, Leslie.
So did I hear you correctly that there have been over 500 requests for mental health requests just in this school year alone?
No, so there's been 315 referrals for the mental health centers. That's a little bit less than last year, but we also have had a higher rate of completion. Like the referrals are actually turned into students being seen. We've had 512 referrals to our social workers, which our social workers we just got funding for in August. I know that many on this, including Monica Faulkner, has been advocating for that for a long time. And so we did get funding. The first 5 were hired by November and the next 5 were hired in January. So they've had 512 referrals. They are referred for other reasons outside of mental health. Mental health has been the #1 mental health concern, but I don't have data of what that was like last year since they're new positions. But they also are referred for basic needs. You know, they help provide connecting families with assistance for rent or not getting evicted in food. And so they see a wide variety of different things from those referrals.
Okay, thank you.
And so are you also saying that the expansion of services to all vertical learning communities, that's something that already exists?
Yes, ma'am. And the social workers are 2 per learning community. So absolutely, if there's a need, they're being served currently.
Hello, I have a question.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Do we know, or are you able to see where any gaps are? Are you able to identify any existing gaps now, kind of in where we are?
No, like I said, with the mental health centers, they're being seen. We've been piloting a program this year called T-Chat that's with Dell Med School in 10 of our elementaries. It provides, it's free, and it provides psychological services pretty fast. And they're waiting on funding approval, but we'll expand that even to more campuses that want that this next year. But if there's a need arises, I'm confident right now that they're either seen by a social worker and or by mental health centers, or both. In some cases, that's appropriate too.
Okay, thank you.
Kelly?
This is, yeah, so this is just confusing to me because we hear about like delays in like the time, like the wait time to be connected with the counselor. So when I think about gaps, I don't just think that somebody's not being seen, but that, you know, that you're not being seen in a timely way. And my understanding was that there were some significant time lapses in which students who did not have insurance or who were relying on district services were waiting. But yeah, please help me understand.
So the mental health centers, the first year they were fully funded by the district. This year we started, and it actually didn't even happen until January, that Bluebonnet Trails files insurance if a student has it. But there is no delay. There's no difference in timing between students who have insurance or don't have insurance. That's on a back end that doesn't impact it at all. The delays that we have seen, and Dr. Lewis and I meet at least monthly. We talk a lot more to Jessica Gentry, who's our partner at Bluebonnet Trails, of if there's a student hasn't gotten in, like what has been that delay? Has it been a parent not signing consent form? Has it been just a miscommunication? And like I said, compared to in the community, the turnaround, I'm very happy with our turnaround, and students are being seen much quicker at our mental health centers than if they tried to see a therapist in the community.
Do you have like an average time? I mean, is there an average?
No, but I mean, if forms are signed and stuff, I mean, it's probably a month, which in that realm of mental health is about normal for when you can start seeing someone. It's not an automatic, it's not a crisis service. And those are, it's for more longer term care.
Do you think it would be appropriate, given that we're like moving into a year seeing, where kids have been home and just away and are experiencing higher levels of crisis, to leave such a recommendation on for the board to consider funding additional like personnel, I mean, because
there's two things with that. First, we did hire 10 social workers, and like I said, they have picked up a lot too, that they're providing services. They're currently trying to staff the fourth one. When we're full, we were not on a wait list. We're still not technically on a wait list. And so there are some opportunities with funding that if I need to hire another therapist, we can. I just have not seen the need up until this point, that the delays aren't because we don't have available therapists. It's not like, so it's always this balance, right? Because I don't want to pay for somebody doesn't have a caseload, and that hasn't been. And so once they have the fourth therapist filled, we're good. And like I said, we're seeing as many as we did last year. And that we have all these other resources also, that the mental health centers is one aspect of all different supports we provide to students.
Monica Faulkner, you have something?
Yes. Well, kind of Amy just covered it. Like, I think it's important to understand that when these systems were, kind of developing, and LaShonda and Amy have done a great job on just like all of this, right? And getting it through. But we really thought through, like, the first tier, right, of intervention is going to be your social work staff. Like, is this really an issue where a kid needs a therapist, or do they need food, right? So that was like the first level of intervention. And then you have counselors on campus too. And then the Bluebonnet therapists were really for longer term needs, so not necessarily crisis, right? If somebody's suicidal, there are staff that are going to deal with that. But so with that said, like some of these recommendations, when I was reading them, I was kind of like, you know, do we really want to throw all of this at the board? Because they just supported us developing these programs. They're not as robust as they could be, right? Because we don't have infinite dollars. I remember when I presented to the board and I asked for one social worker per school, and I had one of the board members with a calculator, and they're like, you want $10 million? And I was like, yeah, I do. But you know, we're not there yet. And so I'm really feeling like these, you know, what is the value add, right? Or are we kind of nitpicking a system that is not fully developed? And maybe the recommendation should just be, you continue to put more money in this, and you continue to support LaShonda, and you continue to support Amy, because it's been a tough year and they're making it happen. That's my 2 cents. So I'm a little uncomfortable with like the number of recommendations.
So let me go through, because there is a grouping of them that address kind of the same scope. So we had the one that just talked about addressing existing gaps and expanding services to all vertical learning communities. We also had recommendation number 5 about establishing consultation response timelines, if none exist, and monitor outcomes of the timelines. We also had recommendation number 6 that wanted to revisit the HIPAA regulations for Bluebonnet Trails communication and sharing of student-specific data to evaluate the quality and expectations of services. And then we also had recommendation number 7 that was looking at the equity of service timelines and delivery to students at Bluebonnet Trails with and without insurance, and make any necessary adjustments for equity purposes. I think that's how I would align those chunk of all relating to kind of the same topic, and wanted to make sure we opened up to that discussion, since Monica Faulkner brought up the kind of breadth of the recommendations. So additional discussion?
Can I give a little clarification since it's open to all of those?
Yes.
I appreciate, Monica, you saying like we are building this. You know, we're in year 2 of the mental health centers. When I became director of behavioral health, they came under me in March. And so, I mean, that was already one transition, and then transition to virtual. And so LaShonda and I have worked really well together this year of trying to see what are our gaps within the mental health centers and how can we improve it. One of the first things was last year, student IDs were not collected with the referral form. So I had no way then to bring data back and to be able to run data to see the demographics of our students being seen. That's being done this year. So at the end of the year, we can run reports to make sure what are the different student groups being seen, and are there some that aren't being referred at the same rate as others, so we can really look into that. And I think that we have a great relationship with Bluebonnet Trails, and being able to, our counselors and our social workers have releases with them so that they can talk about students and make sure that treatment is aligned between what's happening with their Bluebonnet Trails therapist and what's happening on campus. So I just wanted to give that context too, that the evaluation and a lot of that is happening. It's just we're in the second year.
I want to chime back in. I know Michael had a lot of feedback from, I think, just community members. I don't know, Michael, are you able to talk at all?
Michael has, I think he's in class. And so I know that, yeah, I think that he's posted a question in the chat about the rate.
Yeah.
What I'm sensing is that the recommendations, that there's some worry that the recommendations are going to perhaps be received or delivered as a criticism of a job, that's being done and being done really well. Rather than how I interpret it as being just sort of what we can see as like identifying, or just kind of like reviewing and being aware and making sure that these are the reports that we're hearing. So just monitoring and collecting data. And Amy, I mean, I know that y'all are new, and so you're starting to do more to collect data that you weren't able to do last year. It's been even more challenging to do it this year. In our conversations as a committee, there wasn't a tone of they're doing a bad job. There was a tone of we do want to make sure that if we can provide any sort of perhaps further basis or justification for you to do more or do the things that would help you do a good job, or to help you to justify increased resources or what have you, like that's what we would like to do. I just wanted to say that because I certainly don't want this to come off as a criticism.
No, and I didn't take it that way. I just felt like there was a lot of misinformation of what is actually happening, and what things are in place currently. So that's all. I was just trying to clarify that I think a lot of things y'all were asking for are actually happening and are in place that we have been doing this year. And I just wanted to make sure people knew that that was happening.
So how does this committee feel if we took those recommendations 4 to 7 and pulled them, but considered taking a look at that and getting that information presented to us at our SHAC meetings next year?
That's exactly what I was going to suggest.
Okay. Anybody opposed to that plan? Okay. So I will take that note. We're going to take recommendations 4 to 7. We're going to look for an update on the mental health centers specific to that information at the SHAC meetings next year. And if we want to move on to the next recommendation, we're at 8.
And I apologize, I do not remember whose recommendation this one was, but this is about alignment of homeroom care programs across the district. I just want the person who authored it to talk about it.
I think this was mine again, and it just again speaks to uniformity. I think we have some very good success stories of CARES programs, but the rollout did not seem consistent across the district. And so we wanted to be supportive of that and make sure there's some uniformity and all the students are benefiting across the district, again, in a recovery type year.
Discussion, thoughts, questions? Okay. So any motions?
I'll make a motion to adopt recommendation 8.
Can I ask a question? I'm sorry, it just occurred to me, but it says that if alignment does not already exist, I mean, do we know, LaShonda and Amy, alignment doesn't exist, right? So do we want to just change that to take out that phrase?
And is this talking about the care team that Rochelle Fink has started leading and some of the SHAC members have come on board with?
My kids go to Ridgeview, and I know Ridgeview has some good activity in that direction that Dr. Metcher's put in place. But a lot of our activity happens in homeroom time with the SEL component of that, and it doesn't sound like there is full implementation or alignment of that across all schools across the district.
I think this is another one of those programs that is just now getting started. So the care team at Ridgeview is one of the first care teams within the district. And then also just keeping in mind that every campus, even though there's some things that universally we do as a district, that a lot of the work on campuses really have to be tailored to the needs of the students on campus. And so I can't say you guys should do with this recommendation, but I think there probably needs to be some more understanding of what's actually in place across the district. And maybe this is something that we can look at for next school year and allow some time for implementation across campuses.
I would also add, because I know Jennifer, yours go to Ridgeview and City Mine, and I've heard about care class like from my kid like every week. And since I was on the committee when we voted for SEL, she blames me for it. And she really hates it. Because I think in the virtual setting, it was just like a total waste of time for her. And like literally she was falling asleep at her computer. So I wonder if it will get better next year, you know, like if there are some people in person. I don't know. I don't know that that helps the discussion of the recommendation, but that was just my sense of like, you know, I'm just going to let it have time to see what happens.
And I think that, you know, some of where our discussion in the subcommittee resided, that there are great things happening in isolation across the district that do seem like they should be implemented more uniformly because they are very good things. This would be an example of that, and sure, there's always ways to improve upon what exists, but there are schools where it doesn't exist at all. And so I know the care team is working on a wider implementation, which is great. But I think we as a group really wanted to support, you know, in concept that maybe we don't do this quite as independently as each individual school, but a program like this has some more uniformity to it. Because I know as a parent, I hear a lot of conversation about this school has this school has this, and it does lead to some frustration, I think, amongst parents why there isn't more uniformity of programs or academic offerings in a unified school district. So I think that's the spirit of where this was going.
Snehal?
I want to.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, like Dr. Lewis mentioned, that every campus is different, and that's probably why the programs that they are that get chosen for each campus look different to serve the unique needs of that campus. Having seen so many campuses, and I completely see what Dr. Lewis is saying, and that's why I like the recommendation. It's just that I also agree that there are different programs available, and there could be. I mean, it's beneficial to have different programs to cater to different communities. That's the reason why I had put the third. I kind of tried to address that same thing in the third part of the recommendation 12. So if Dr. Faulkner feels comfortable, maybe we can keep that one.
All right, and Dr. Lewis?
Thank you. So what I was going to add was that Rochelle has also created a district care team, and that part of that care team is myself, Dr. Wiswell within counseling services, also Dr. Grosso with behavioral health, but then we also have special ed members, district members on that team, but then we also have the voice of campus administrators and campus counselors, a wide variety of district staff. What we're really looking at is, you know, not only our system as a whole, but what are the individual needs of those campuses, and how do we get everyone to understand what our district needs as a whole, but also what our campuses need, and who are those individuals within the district that can provide those services. So I just wanted to put that, make that clear for everyone, that that is something that we as a district are working on as well.
I have a question. Does the word, so the way that it's worded, it's that the district considers alignment, and then there's also at the end of it that allows student input into topics they find relevant with the goal of increased participation. I feel like there's language written into the recommendation that allows for the district to use their best discretion as to whether this is an appropriate alignment, and to allow campuses sort of that discretion about how to build the program out for that particular campus. I could be wrong, and I could just be not understanding the program appropriately, but I also want to highlight that this is, to me, the way I understand this recommendation is just an example of us highlighting something positive in the district and asking for more of it, rather than trying to put a spotlight on like a blemish. Like it's more about this one seems to be a good positive thing. Can we consider expanding it?
And so I have Dr. Grosso who's going to say something, but I do also want us to keep a good focus on the recommendations, because I think that in a narrative, we could talk about all the things that we're pleased about that we've seen happen in the district without having to incorporate it into one of the recommendations, since we are submitting a written report. So I think that's also something that we can do in really making sure that the recommendations are substantive. And that's just another thought of how we look at it. But let me go ahead and let Dr. Grosso speak.
I just, we had submitted some feedback on all these recommendations, and Rochelle Fink, this is under her area. And so I just wanted to read what she had said, since she's not here, and this is her area. She had talked about, as we launch explicit instruction in 21-22 academic year and recalibrate towards best practices throughout all levels of instruction, resources and coaching will be provided to campuses to ensure alignment and adherence with best practices within school settings. I will be happy to share the scope and sequence for next year when it is finalized and has been reviewed by the district care team later this spring.
Right. So that, as I was saying at the beginning, we wanted to make sure to keep some of these on the eye for the committee. Dr. Faulkner, I mean, if this is an example of like one of those that we were like, okay, well, maybe it is something that we can keep on the agenda for the committee next year. If that's why we didn't want to take everything off, just because there was feedback that it was in development.
And some of it was just intended to be reinforcement. I mean, we certainly did pay attention and read the feedback that the district staff gave to us, but we did have a pretty big discussion about keeping some of these things for exactly the reason Kelly mentioned, but also just reinforcing our support behind your efforts and saying that to the trustees as well. But I suppose if you don't think that's necessary or redundant in some way, we can remove it and just follow it next year.
Right, so I can also take this one just like we did with the previous recommendations and have us get those updates that it sounds like there will be, and we can table this one and move it towards next year. Is anyone opposed to that plan? Okay. So then our next recommendation, we're at 9.
This is mine as well. We really thought the district has done a great job putting training in place. The one gap that we did identify was possibly in that peer-to-peer side of the house, and we think it's very powerful what peers can help to do to advocate for other peers and get them help when they're potentially in crisis. And I know we did talk about that, Dr. Lewis. I think you are vetting programs. Again, we wanted to reinforce the importance of that as a maybe missing gap and one that should be filled. And I know you're vetting programs, and we would certainly look forward to hearing an update. But I think I feel pretty strongly about still keeping this one on since it's in an earlier stage, and make sure if you need any funding specific to add that. I know you did talk about some of the expense side of the house, but I do feel like this one is one we should keep.
I just wanted to make sure, because the way that it's worded, I don't know if it's stating the recommendation. And I guess is the recommendation that we continue to explore and invest in the peer-to-peer programs?
Yes, that's the intent.
Okay. And so Dr. Lewis?
Yes, just to give you an update, I believe I spoke on this at our last meeting. So we did, myself, Dr. Wiswell, and a few of our counselors speak with some representatives from Hope Squad. And while we felt like it was a great program, there were some components that were missing. And the main part that was missing was the 100% participation of all kids on campus. So Hope Squad was a program really designed for a group of students to be the eyes and ears of the school, rather than providing lessons to all students across the district or on their campus. And so this summer, what group of counselors, so elementary, middle, and high school counselors will be working on is implementing a program for the students on their campuses. So what we're hoping to do is have a group of students be similar to what Hope Squad was, the eyes and ears of the students on campus, but then also providing lessons to all of our students on campus around mental health and mental health awareness. Dr. Grosso and I are also working on some additional suicide prevention policies and activities for our entire district. And so our hope is that as our teachers are mandated to get information on suicide prevention and mental health, that our students are doing that as well annually through their classrooms.
So Dr. Lewis, is it helpful for a recommendation coming from the SHAC to the board that they, continue to support and invest in peer-to-peer programming?
I think it would be beneficial to have as much backing as possible. It is something that we're going to be going through with the start of this coming school year.
All right, and it looks like we have some suggestion for a rewording that Round Rock ISD continue to support efforts and investment in peer-to-peer programming, and then following and tracking that language. Any other thoughts, questions, or discussion? All right, any motions? Any motion on the amended language?
I'll make a motion to adopt the recommendation with the amended wording at the beginning to direct the district to continue to support.
All right, any second?
I'll second.
All right, all those in favor, please drop that in the chat that you are in favor. Right? Anyone is opposed, you can put that in the chat now. All right, I don't see any opposed. So the amended language that starts off with the language that Monica Faulkner put in there is going to be approved and move forward as the recommendation. All right, the next recommendation.
So the next recommendation is actually mine as well with counseling services. And so I do actually want to amend this because it doesn't speak to actually what the Lone Star State School Counseling Association is really speaking to in regards to the work of a school counselor. If we could amend it to say that Round Rock ISD adopts Lone Star State School Counselor Association's defined roles and responsibilities, ensure that counselors' time is devoted to counseling roles and responsibilities, including 80% direct contact with students and planning and maintaining a comprehensive counseling program. So instead of that 80% being one line and that 20% being another, if we can combine those two, and then taking out that part that says that percent of a counselor's time, or that 100%.
Okay.
And so what we have found is that our school counselors, we always joke and say that they never say no because they want to be supportive, not only to their students, but also to the administrators and everyone else on campus. But what we found is that sometimes there can be other duties as assigned that there are other people within the campus that could take on those roles, but school counselors are doing those roles, and many of those roles are clerical, and that takes away from the time that they could be working proactively to prevent some serious issues that may be occurring with our students.
So I put the updated language. Can you make sure I got it correctly, what you said?
Yes.
All right, so any discussion, questions, concerns? All right, any motions?
Make a motion to adopt.
The updated language?
Yes.
I'll
All right,
second that.
Second. All those in favor, go ahead and drop in the chat that you're in favor. And anyone opposed, go ahead and put it in the chat. All right, everyone is in favor, so that updated language will move forward. And the next recommendation?
All right, number 11, that Round Rock ISD make changes to the current counselor staffing model by adopting the American School Counselor Association's national model student to counselor ratio of 250 to 1. Our ratios are currently 450 to 1, with particular focus on the middle and elementary levels. Our high school counselor ratios are extremely close, and I will say that we are really happy with our high school ratios, even though they're not the 250 to 1. Our high school ratios range from 300 to 1 to 350 to 1, which you can't find a high school outside of Round Rock ISD that comes close to that. In particular, with our elementary campuses, we do have campuses that have relatively large number of students, and we'll have maybe one counselor or maybe 1.5 counselors on the campus that are working with students. And so what I would like to see is that we get closer to that ratio. I'm open to amending this to say that it's not something that needs to happen immediately, but something that we can move in a direction of. But I think if we can be more proactive and work proactively with our students, and we will have less of a need for additional services.
Yeah, and I'll chime in on that one as well. LaShonda, I did ask our HR department to run the numbers and the budget cost on this one, and it would be close to $6 million to try to do this in 1 year. In addition, there were concerns about the number of counselor applicants that we could feasibly have apply for these positions within 1 year. So I love the recommendation. I think I agree with LaShonda that our high school counseling ratios, I'm proud of those in comparison to other districts. I do agree that we have room to improve at both middle and more importantly, or more so at elementary. So definitely concur with that as well. I think maybe a step on this one to avoid that really throwing a big one at the board, if I could offer a recommendation that it would be to work towards that staffing ratio, perhaps over, I don't know if you all wanted to designate a number of years or perhaps to approach it from the focus of the elementary lens to increase that ratio in the upcoming year. But I think it might be prudent to somehow target this either over time or target to a group, a specific area of elementary or middle, perhaps next year.
Well, it was a goal over a 3-year time. Can someone else on my, sorry, of course that happens. Yeah. Can someone else on my subcommittee speak to that, please?
Katie's talking about, we decided at the very last 15 minutes before we all fell asleep on the call together, that we should set some time guidelines, because recognizing that we couldn't get all of this done, it just wasn't feasible. So if you scroll down, you'll see a sort of our table of things that we said, okay, in our perfect world, this will be year 1. This could, maybe we'll accept this to be year 2 or 3 or however. So you can kind of see, and this is one that we kind of put out as I believe a year 3.
Okay, that's helpful. I'm sorry for the interjection. Then I don't have that in front of me. So
Mandy, you're always helpful though. And thanks for running those numbers too. That was really awesome. Did we, Dr. Lewis, I'm sorry, did we, you didn't say that there was any language amendments that needed to happen that you identified in that?
No, the only thing I suggested was to, and because I read this and my dog's still seeing the table, but to make it more clear within the recommendation that it's something that we're looking to happen over time, not next school year.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. If we bring in that piece, let me see, I took a stab at it really quickly. That Round Rock ISD create a 3-year plan to have a counselor staffing model in accordance with the American School Counselor Association's national model for a student to counselor ratio of 250 to 1. The rest is the same. I would add the word "to." That was my quick, I missed that word, but I could add that in there and that could be updated language.
I like that. So moved.
Any second?
Second.
All those in favor, if you can go ahead and drop in favor in the chat. All right, anyone opposed can put that in the chat. All right, that updated language on recommendation 11 will move forward. Recommendation 12.
All right, so that was mine. And I know it looks big, but it's not that big. It's just, we just wanted to make sure the language communicates our intent. So the first one, and again, if you look at the proposed implementation timeline, we had included parts of it in year 1, year 2, and year 3, and I'll go there as well. So the first one says that Round Rock ISD defines the roles of Round Rock ISD entities working towards mental and behavioral health of Round Rock ISD students and staff, such as Round Rock ISD Department of Behavioral Health Services, including social workers and mental health centers, Department of Counseling, SEL, Department of Equity, and Department of Safety, Special Education, etc. So this came out of, I believe we have so much happening in our district. It's just that we don't have a good understanding that it's happening. And if we just had it defined somewhere, we would know, the SHAC members would know who to contact for what, and it will also give a chance to everyone to kind of look at the gaps. For example, now that we have the Department of Equity, I'm not referring to the gap as such. It's the way it's in our Round Rock ISD. It's in the safety department. So it's really good. It's just that a lot of people don't understand this. So I felt like defining it somewhere that way, it will be easier for people to understand all of the good things that we are doing, and also to kind of help people like even the SHAC members to and where to go for the information for what areas are we looking at. Do you want me to go ahead and read the second one, or?
So because it's in different pieces. So let me make sure that I understand that the first part is to make sure that we understand kind of what the definitions are for all the different entities. And the second part is the public information to make sure that's available.
So it's, yeah, the first part is about defining the roles of all the entities included in this. In our committee discussions, we discussed aligning all of them under the counseling department. Then we thought, no, it's in the behavioral health department, and it may not be best to kind of bring everybody under one director. So at least there needs to be the roles need to be defined, and kind of there needs to be some place where it says that how it works and who all are the not stakeholders, who are all the departments that are contributing to these, in what capacity.
Okay. And then can you help me understand the third part as well? You can go ahead and go over that just so we have it all together and we can chew on it at once.
Okay, so the first one was about defining the role so that everybody can understand. The second one was about the public information that Round Rock ISD communicate to the Round Rock ISD stakeholders, including students and parents, about the resources available, where to find them, and how to use them via clear, reliable, and intuitive means, such as on the Round Rock ISD website, student and parent handbooks, and any additional means of communication to ensure awareness in all students, staff, and parents. And so this is what I had proposed, and the second one came from the committee later. So this was for, there are a lot of programs in our Round Rock ISD done by a lot of departments. Not necessarily students and parents know about all of them. So a lot of the feedback that we got, oh, we need this, we need that, and then we came to know, oh, we already have these things. So one of the things we realized, I know there are some pieces like website is already available, it's been worked at. One thing could be in the beginning of the year, the student handbook, the district kind of makes every student and parent to go over the student and parent handbook, and it's in there. So if we could add something like, I know where to find these resources, and this is something that I thought of, because when our communications department used to send the emails like, if you have a technology issue, if your child is virtual, do you know who to contact? That was one of the questions. And it's like, it's a check mark that you know that every parent knows that. And it feels like a lot of times people are complaining that they don't know all of this information, or they genuinely don't know all of this information. So if we can make that effort to communicate all of this information in a more reliable way. So
Yeah,
that was the second one. And the third one was about the curriculum. So again, there were, in our committee discussions, we discussed several different programs done at different campuses. And I felt like every campus has different needs, and they're at different levels, there are different needs. So that's why this is worded like this, that Round Rock ISD establish or reinforce or support programs and partnerships to educate all students, staff, and parents on mental and behavioral wellness topics, such as, and these may look different at different levels and campuses, resilience as provided by TEA, and belonging to ensure further balance between resilience and social emotional learning, developmentally appropriate socialization, bullying, cyberbullying, or potentially concerning technology apps, etc., anxiety management, trauma, and suicide prevention, safe spaces to talk about mental health to reduce the stigma, and substance, tobacco, alcohol, vape use prevention and treatment. So these are some topics that our committee came up with that we feel that these Round Rock ISD could establish the programs if there are none at a campus, or reinforce if they're there and working well, or support. And it doesn't need to be a program that Round Rock ISD needs to come up with. If you can build partnerships to do that, that's also all right. If the intent was to make sure it's available for all students, instead of making it mandatory and setting the set structure for all of the campuses.
It sounds like the spirit of this one was accessibility and transparency. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So discussions, thoughts, questions. I think it's a lot to chew on and thinking about the way we've broken it up. So Monica Faulkner, you want to go ahead and start?
I totally agree with the spirit of it. I just think as a recommendation that it would need to be tightened up a little bit to make clear exactly what we're asking. And then one concern I have is when we start listing topics like this, it can get, because we can sit here all night and point out what's missing from that list. But I feel like a lot of that is already being addressed by either the parent education topics or SEL lessons. And so I just wonder about the necessity of it as a whole, and if it's not already captured in some of what we've already talked about.
And
those are my
Kelly?
concerns.
I think Kelly was next. Oh, no?
Yeah.
Who else did I see? Somebody else had a thought, comment?
Robin, you had your hand up, didn't you?
I did have my hand up.
Go ahead, Robin.
I sort of feel similarly to how Monica feels for the third part of that recommendation. It does get really specific, but if everybody's going to adopt it anyway, may I add adolescent psychological development to that list?
And if I, thank you. If I think about how this could be tackled and understanding, I think the third part probably adds a lot, but if the spirit of the accessibility and transparency is there a way that we can improve the language to at least start with those two pieces? Because I do see value into understanding everything that we do have available and also having that accessible for families to know in different languages as well. So thoughts? Go ahead.
Can I answer the question from Dr. Faulkner? The question was about the third point And that's why it says that Round Rock ISD establishes, reinforces, or supports. So if there are programs already on a campus, we are not saying that you need to do anything, but if there are gaps, then something needs to be done there. So that's why we kind of added that. And it's like the year 2 and year 3, that's where it is. The first 2 are more of the year 1 goals. So I'm okay with Judge Jones' recommendation as well.
Yeah, and I just want to, I guess, emphasize the context that went behind all of these recommendations, which is that this is I hate this word because it's been used to death lately, but it is an unprecedented year for mental health. So if we're erring on the side of, overabundance and reinforcing programs that might somehow help or catch slipping students, that's something that I'm totally comfortable with doing. More so this year than any other. I mean, I also want to be pragmatic and understand that there are limited resources, and especially coming off of this year, but to make a statement that the mental health of our students needs to be, priority 1 in the coming years, I'm okay with erring on the side of repetition or redundance a little bit. So.
And Hillary?
I wonder if this would fit, we're recommending to the board to have that committee to explore the possibility of a health education class in middle school. I wonder if people would be interested in rolling number 3 into that one. Some topics to consider for that class would be, and then listing these.
Go ahead.
That was the intent that Tara had. Sorry.
Okay.
So that's why I had mentioned that time that the only difference is the your committee's recommendation was made mandatory, and here we are giving more flexibility, because making all of these things mandatory will be not practical and may not work well for every campus too.
And then Monica, you had something you wanted to add?
Not really, actually. I do agree with the 5 languages, but that needs to be a priority. I think that should be its own recommendation pulled out. My fear is, this is all packaged and it's given to the school board. And so it really needs to be packaged in a way that is easy for them to understand why we're asking for these things, because they're not necessarily going to hear all these conversations. And if we're not specific enough on some things, then it's going to come back where the school district responds and says, to the board, like, we can't really do this, because we didn't give enough direction or, but so I just wanted to throw that out there. That's my concern in like this whole list of recommendations of whether or not it can be made more cohesive as a package.
I was considering, though, particularly about the first and second part of this recommendation, if it can be pulled up closer to, I think it'll help, just that very first recommendation about supporting mental health centers being resourced and equipped. Because I think if we give this recommendation right after that, it'll make a lot of sense to them.
Because the first question, every time I've presented multiple times these recommendations, and the first question the board will ask is, well, aren't we already doing that? And it's like, well, kind of yes, and so we just want to be really clear that, we are doing it, but we're just saying we further support it. But yeah, so I just think we might want to rearrange a little bit. I'm not opposed to any of this. I think it's great. It's more just the packaging.
Jennifer?
I've been attending the CARE teams. I think I've gone to 3 meetings, but I do want to say, maybe Dr. Grosso can verify, or if I'm not quite right on this, but they are, through that committee, compiling a list of all these resources within the district, points of contact. So if we have the potential to be redundant, we might be a little redundant there. That already is in the works.
Absolutely. And, LaShonda mentioned that earlier, that it's stuff for a conglomerate and all these different departments coming together. And so we'll be piloting next year of how that looks on campuses, but it is really, what are the different services we have? How are they aligned? How do our campus people know who to go to? But then also how parents know the different services, because we do offer some amazing services, just not everybody's aware. So that is a prime function of what we're doing.
Kelly, did you have something?
I think I just wanted to thank Monica for her feedback on that. Because like I know that some of us had never, even though this is our second year on SHAC, I think kind of a lot of us who ended up on this like planning call were sort of not really sure how this process plays out, because last year just kind of didn't end. Like it just kind of stopped and we didn't really finish it up. So I do appreciate the sort of that advice.
And I do want to make sure, Mandy, I think the plan is still that I'll present our recommendations on the virtual platform, which I think we'll have for the board. So they will be able to hear us and it won't be just on submission. So I did want to make sure everybody knew that was coming too. Snehal, go ahead.
Yeah, and we had discussed in one of our previous meetings that like when it was suggested to have mental health centers, it was more of a longer term goal. So some of these are more of longer term goals, and that's why we went to and we discussed that there could be 1 year and 3 year goals, and that's why we followed the path that some of our year 1 and year 3, because the committee the committee worked on these topics and came up with these things. We could kind of table it or give it as an information. It doesn't need to be something that needs to be done right away, or if it's being already done, then it's not a recommendation, right? But it's just that input that we got and we came up with these things. It's more of making sure that this is there. That's the thing. It's not like we need to add all these things, because if it's there, it's already there. We just need to kind of acknowledge it.
And I wanted to mention one other part about what Monica said, as far as the third one goes. And I think it's a fairly good example, having another addition added to the recommendation as far as specific topics, that if sometimes I think we either be inclusive of all the topics or we leave it open enough, because I think that otherwise it could be read as the only topics that are being considered. And I just worry about if we list some and not all, that something looks as if we're not prioritizing it as important. And so that was the only other thing I wanted to make sure we thought about on that third piece of it.
Can we just add including but not limited to, or does that not really solve it?
Snehal, go ahead.
Yeah, and as SHAC, we are one team. So I'm completely fine in changing the language as our team feels appropriate, and including Dr. Grosso and Ms. Estes and Dr. Lewis, your input as well. I think the topics such as words were used just to kind of giving examples. It's not the list. It's not the complete list. But I like Katie's recommendation, suggestion as well. I'm open, like.
Any other thoughts, questions?
I'm just, I am attaching the document with the feedback from Dr. Grosso and Mandy and Rochelle Fink, so that if that needs to be on any record, that they can, that is there.
I still think that we should eliminate the specific language in the curriculum section, just because I think it would prime people to only consider topics like those and not really seek out more input and think outside the box. I think it's better to leave it open-ended so they would do the work to do the consultations they need to do.
Any other discussion? Any motions?
I motion to amend the curriculum section of this recommendation.
Okay, and specifically to just leave it more open-ended and not include the specific topics.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Any second to that motion?
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a second. All those in favor of the recommendation with the change that we don't list the specific topics in the third curriculum piece, go ahead and drop in the chat that you are in favor. All right, and if anybody is opposed, you can put that in the chat. All right, majority is in favor. So with that adjustment as to not list the specific topics, the recommendation will move forward. And I believe that was our last recommendation. Is that right?
That's correct.
You guys are awesome.
Judge Jones, I wanted to just note that we'll also need to revise the timetable to reflect the recommendations that were tabled.
Yes, and I have had a volunteer, Monica Faulkner, is going to help me to revise it. And so we have the copies, and we'll make sure that it gets updated. I took the notes. I did want to also say that I hope everybody doesn't mind, but not changing any language, but maybe moving the order in which some of them appear in the report. We might do that just to make sure it flows and has a good feel to the read and makes sense.
Sure.
But anything else that we want to discuss today? Okay, you guys are an awesome SHAC. Y'all have been great. We'll get the final version together and make sure everybody has a copy of it.
Judge?
Yes.
May I ask, there were a couple of recommendations that were discussed in the last meeting out of the executive committee. I don't recall, maybe someone else does. Did we vote, did the SHAC vote on those, or were those completed?
Yeah, we took care of that at the very beginning. We're just gonna make sure we send forward the bylaws that say 3 years. That was one of the recommendations. And then the other one, we just were not moving forward.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
All right. Any motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
Oh,
All right.
I'll second that. Sorry.
Everybody's in favor, I'm sure. Don't forget the walk. Thank you for all of your help and support on this. Y'all did an amazing job. Thank you, guys. Y'all have a great night. We are adjourned.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank y'all.
You guys are great.